So now we are going to start the conference by taking a look at the definition of eSports in order to identify what can be qualified as eSport, and I think that's the main question. This will allow us to define also the framework of eSports and better understand the structure of its market. So this first session will be moderated by Federico Ast, and I thank you, Federico, for that. And I invite Professor Geoffray Brunaux and Patrick Pithon to join us on stage. And Federico, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Yeah? No. Hello? Yeah. Okay, while you take your chairs, so I will introduce our speakers. We have here Geoffray Brunaux, who specializes in contract law and consumer law. He's interested in various issues related to e-commerce and new technologies. He was appointed at the Faculty of Law and Political Science of Reims in 2010. He teaches contract law at various levels, among other subjects, and he has contributed to different books on contracts in consumer industries. And I saw your book today because Florence has it, and yeah, I mean, I will read it. I didn't have it, but you know, I will certainly get it. And he's a great Street Fighter 2 player, and I can say that because he told me before. And Patrick Pithon is a Swiss qualified attorney specializing in international commercial and sports arbitration. He advises athletes, clubs, and sport federations in a wide range of matters, particularly in proceedings before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Additionally, he acts as counsel or secretary to the arbitral tribunal in commercial arbitration proceedings under various rules, including ICC and UNCITRAL. And Patrick is the legal coordinator of the Swiss eSports Federation. I mean, to start with, and as an icebreaker, tell us a bit, what games did you play when in your formative years, and what got you interested in gaming esports?
Street Fighter 2, as we said, and as you can see, I'm a Rocket League player also, very bad Rocket League player.
So let's say I think I started playing with Microsoft Flight Simulator because my dad used to play a lot. Then I started playing with sports simulation game like NHL and stuff like that. And I have to admit, I still play a lot. A few weeks ago, I was at the Polyland in Lausanne, for example, where you have some tournaments, and I play some Overwatch, the finals, Counter-Strike, etc., etc.
Good. Well, let's start by defining what are esports. I mean, for people who are just getting into this industry, how can we define esports, and how are they different from sports?
I don't know if you can define esports. You know, in France we have a law which is called a law for a digital republic. It's always remember one thing. There's a Star Wars game which is called Star Wars: The Old Republic, and in France we have the Digital Republic. It's frightening. So, but there's definition in this law of not of esports, but of video game competition. And it explains that the competition between players, 2 players or more players, in order to win something. And the particularity is that you can win money. You can win money. And I'm not sure that money is a criteria for esports. I'm not sure about that. I think in the mind of the French legislator, there was a difference between esports, that you can practice like another sport, and competition of video game.
Okay. Now, you want to add something? Because now they have a presentation, so after this icebreaker, if you want to make your presentation?
With pleasure.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Yes, that's good. So, I want to thank Professor Florence Guillaume for the invitation. When she said she was organizing an event about eSport, I answer, yes, of course. Of course, I'm ready, of course. I'm really pleased to meet you, Federico, because just before this conference, we played about old games, Mortal Kombat, Maniac Mansion also. It was games of the last century. Patrick, I'm really happy to meet you again. For a short history, we met last year on June, and it was a meeting about eSport, and we talk about eSport, dispute resolutions, and the team is back. So, the question we have, we'll try to answer, is to qualify esports. As we said, in France, there's a law, Loi pour une République numérique, law for digital republic, sorry, and in this law, there's a lot of things. We told about digital death, public data, marketplaces regulation, competitive video game, and more and more and more. About competitive video game, there's, in my opinion, 3 main rules. The first is a guarantee of payment of winnings. Why? There was a lot of cases with the prize money which was promised to attract teams. The competition arrives at the end, and finally, there's not prize money. So this law is here to guarantee that payment is done. Second rule, administrative declaration of competitions. The competition is declared by sending information to the Interior Ministry in a service which is called Central Racing and Games. Third rules, supervision of the participation of young players and protection of their winnings. When you are a young player, if you are not 12 years old in France, you cannot play in a video game competition. And then, if you are between 12 and 16, you cannot have the money. The winning are paid into an account à la Caisse des dépôts. This money can be used not by the players and not by their parents. The main bring of this law, also in my opinion, is the definition of video game competition. I read it. A video game competition confronts, based on a video game, at least 2 players or teams of players for a score or a victory. You can notice, as we said, that there's no definition of esports, but video game competition. And that's why these rules are not transposed in sports code. They are transposed in the Interior Security Code in a title about casinos and gambling. Why? In the mind of the French legislator, a video game competition is only to win prize money. Only for that. I think this French definition, video game competition, is a wrong way to qualify eSport. Esports is another thing. To qualify it, we can start from the point that eSport is like an activity near from a sport, but whose specificity is to be practiced with a video game which is protected by IP. And about that, we can take examples. First example, tennis. For 2 reasons. There is Roland Garros, and I'm a tennis player. You can choose football, other things. So, tennis as a sport is not protected. You can play tennis. But a protection exists when tennis is played during an official competition. Where is the protection? Trademark, merchandising, ticketing, audiovisual exploitation, and more and more and more. Now, what about esports? And again, it's Rocket League. With esports, we found the same protection. During the competition of Rocket League, there is a protection for trademark, merchandising, ticketing, audiovisual exploitation, and more and more. But there's a difference with eSports. eSports is practiced with a video game protected by IP. And that's the difference between traditional sports and eSports. This definition leads to consequences about typology of disputes. Quickly, because I know there's an observation about that point. Some disputes are the same as in traditional sports. For example, doping. For example, cheating. In sports, traditional sports, we have cheating with technology. For example, in a bike race, you can cheat by modifying your bike. Also, protection of players. Players needs to be protected against other players, against spectators. There's insults, there's hate online. There's that in Roland Garros on Monday. It's so bad. And we have to protect players, again, against their own team. For example, about payment of remuneration. That kind of disputes are traditional, like in sports. But there's new kinds of disputes. 2 examples. The first, organization of competitions. Because video game is protected by IP, we need the agreement of the beneficiary of IP rights on the game. You can't organize a competition without that. Just try something. You want to organize a competition of Super Mario Smash Bros. I love this game. Without the agreement of Nintendo. Maybe a bad idea, I think. Second example, competition registration fees. Why? If you want that a team participates in a competition, you have to pay registration fees. Or sometimes it's expensive. It's too expensive. We have an example with the Optic Texas CEO and player that sue Activision because Activision, for the Call of Duty League, wants the teams to pay fee, which costs $27 million. $27 million. It's anti-competitive. So, according to this element, what is the solution? Some people say that we have to qualify eSports as a sport. Patrick, it's for you. In my opinion, it's a personal point of view, I think I really like that eSports was recognized as a sport for the recognition of physical skills and the training that it involves. Just 2 examples. The first example, that's APM, action per minute. The speedest players can realize 300 APM. That's to say, 5 action per second. It's impressive. I don't know the word in English, but tendinite when I see that. The second example, it's an event. It's a video of an event, and I'd like you take a look at the players and at the atmosphere of this event. And it's the Evo with Street Fighter
3. Rare footage of Daigo actually angry. It's turtle style. Overcome. Now putting Daigo 1-0.
And look at that.
champions at many football games I've been to, you know.
Yeah. Exactly. We are in a sports stadium. Yeah. In this scene, Ken blocked all the lightning kicks of Chun-Li by push and push in rhythm. It's sports here. I think it's sports. So, if we consider that there is no physical involvement, it's not my opinion, but why not? We have in France a mind sport, chess. So, if a chess is a mind sport, why not for eSports? Why not? We consider that eSport is a sport, but there's a new problem. Chess is a sport through form because it exists a chess federation. And in France, when an activity is considered as a sport, we need a federation. Federation of tennis, football, basketball, handball, more and more. So, transposing to eSport, we need an eSport federation. But actually, no one wants to take on this role. No one. There is France eSport. What's France eSport? It's an association bringing together players, teams, studios, which doesn't have the means to do this job. Its goal is to create a platform to collaborate with other actors of the eSports scene. More, if an eSport federation is created, it implies to apply all rules of sports code, rules about organization of competitions, rules about biological passport, etc. About this, I'm not sure that is the way that the sector wants to go. I'm not sure. Next to this first problem, because it was only the first. Next to this first problem, if there is a federation, we have to entrust it to a ministry. Or because of the nature of eSports, we can imagine 3 ministries which are able to entrust it. The first, Ministry of Sports, because eSport could be qualified as a sport. Another, Ministry of Economy, because of the commercial exploitation of the event. Maybe we can hesitate also with Interior Ministry. But why not Ministry of Culture? Don't forget that video games are works of the mind, so protected by IP. I think video games are cultural products, I think. In conclusion, if we have to qualify eSports now, I don't know, really. With the law for Digital Republic, the French legislator took the side of urgency. That's to say, provide protection to players. But we have no information about structuration of eSport. In reality, in France, the work is in progress, actually. However, this lack of definition provides avenues to think about dispute resolution. We already know sports disputes which are resolved by certain mechanisms, arbitration, ad hoc tribunal, etc. When the dispute is the same in eSport, why can we apply the same mechanisms by analogy? The last question is about new kinds of disputes. Can we classify these new kinds of disputes in an existing category and apply this disputes mechanism by analogy? If it isn't possible, we have to imagine new dispute resolution mechanisms. About that, experts are present to talk about it all the afternoon. So it's time for me to let them speak. Thank you very much.
That was great, Geoffray. I have one question that came up when you were speaking. What if I want to organize a Quidditch tournament? I mean, you said tennis is not protected, but what about Quidditch?
It's a good question. It's a good question. In the Japan Expo in France, there's competition of Quidditch, you know. But I don't. That's a good question.
I don't know. I have the answer. Maybe
for the next conference.
Good. Thank you very much. That was awesome. Okay, Patrick, please.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. You will see my presentation is maybe less lively than yours, less video, but we'll try to do something. Here it is. So also thank you to you, Professor Guillaume, for inviting me and the LexTech Institute for this conference. So my goal today is to speak to you about definition of esports, yes, but with the prism of Swiss law. So, you know, we talked about it before. Esports was maybe before seen more as a hobby rather than a sport or a professional competition, let's say it like this. But now, and that's why we have a conference today, it became more a world phenomenon, or let's say it attracted a lot of interest from people, from organization, but also from a lot of stakeholders. One example I have today to show you how much important it became is lately the Saudi Crown Prince. They always want to be involved in sports, but here they announced something super interesting. They launched the eSports World Cup, a tournament series which is about to take place apparently this summer. We never know with the Saudi when it's going to take place, but apparently it's this summer. And what is super interesting is they announced a prize pool of $60 million. So it's not a niche hobby or a waste of time for, as some people have said, but it's something super important. But what about Switzerland? Of course, in Switzerland, it's a little bit less important, or let's say it's more modest, but it's also super important. Some important companies in Switzerland are involved in esports. We have some examples here. For example, Swisscom and TCS, Touring Club Suisse, are involved in esports and have created their own tournament. PostFinance is the first financial company or financial institution to have financed its own team. The TV channel MySports created the e-National League during COVID, where every ice hockey Swiss team had one people competing for them online during the entire season. Then we have also sports teams who are involved in esports. For example, Lausanne Sport have their own organization with several teams. And surprising, that's not all. One of the biggest esports teams in the world is actually based in Switzerland, in Geneva, the so-called Team BDS. One of their latest biggest achievement was winning the Rocket League World Tournament in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, and they finished second in 2023. So esport is definitely something in Switzerland as well. But as we have said, like any booming industries, we have disputes, we have problems, and that's why we are here today, determine how are we going to handle these problems. You asked me before how to define esports. As we said, there is no unique definition. Is it a problem or not? We'll see. I took here the definition of the Swiss Esports Federation. For them, or for us, if I may, esports is known as an electronic sports, individual or teams. It looks like the definition used by the French authorities. Esports demands to surpass oneself through improving one's performance, mainly by skill, strategy, team coordination, while accepting the rules of the game as well as respecting the rules of conduct. We can see some similarities with traditional sports. And esports can be played intensively or professionally. We talked a lot about what is esports. I will not go through entirely the organization, but let's show maybe for the audience some of the games that are currently played in professional tournaments. So esports, like sports, is actually organized through specific genre, if we can say. We have, for example, multiplayer online battles arena, what we call usually MOBA, like League of Legends or Dota 2, real-time strategy, RTS, like StarCraft 2, first-person shooter, FPS like Counter-Strike or Overwatch, sports simulation game like FIFA, NHL, combat games like Street Fighter. We can also say there is some card games, etc., etc. So like traditional sports, esports is structured around not different sports, but different genre and different games. So now the question is, do we have a specific legal framework in Switzerland? We talked about what we have in France. They love creating new laws about everything. Here in Switzerland, it's a bit different. So the first quick observation is that we have no specific regulation in Switzerland about esports. If you try to do a quick research on the recueil systématique and you write esports, nothing is going to come out. So there is no specific law. It means that we have to fall back on what we already have, the general law currently applicable. What does this mean? This means that every issue related to esports will actually be regulated by the general rules. So if we have an issue with a contract, an employment contract issue with a player, should it be qualified as an employment contract is a big question. We'll go through what we have in the Code of Obligation. If we have an issue with the transfer of a player, same. If we have an issue with a sponsoring contract, same. But we talked about should esports be considered as a sport? It's my question to answer. But let's look at this under Swiss law. We have actually in Switzerland a law called the Sports Promotion Act, which has one of its objectives is to promote sports activity. You can see here some of the objectives that are on Article 1 of this law. So the purpose of the law is to increase sports activity, exercise, increase importance of sports in education, training, etc., etc. What is interesting to note is actually the government took the question of esports and tried to understand the opportunity to recognize esports as a sport. First, what they tried to do is define esports. They came up with their own definition, which is not that bad for a government. So their definition in their report, they published the report in 2019. It's in German, so I translated it in English because I thought it was a bit easier for everyone to have it in English rather than in German. They define esport as competitive playing of computer or video games in single or multiplayer mode, just like the French definition actually. It requires gaming skills, so they recognize the necessity of having skills, but also physical skills because they are talking about hand-eye coordination, reaction, and speed. And they also involve the question of strategic, tactical understanding. And now the question is, what do we do with this? Should it be considered as a sport for the government? So I will not. I will go directly to the conclusion of this report. The Swiss Federal Office of Sports consider that some characteristics of esports are actually in conflict with the objective of this promotion act, Sports Promotion Act. First, they note something very interesting is that most popular games, the one I showed you before, if we take out the sports simulation game like FIFA or NHL, they say these games involve killing your opponents, which contradict the ethical and positive value of sport in society. Then we talked about this as well. They recognize the fact that game publishers actually own the IP of the games. So the publisher controls the game and they can control the rule of the game. They say this also contradicts with the traditional sports principle on which traditional sports is based. They also recognize the problem of health, the health concern we have with extended screen time. I'm happy to hear that actually working 8 hours in front of a screen is bad for the government, but we are all doing it anyway. They also know that the World Health Organization warns on online addiction, and esports can be an issue regarding this. And similarly, they say that esports do not increase inactivity, staying in front of the screen rather than doing sports activity. So whether we agree or not with this analysis, the conclusion is that esports is not considered a sport in the Swiss law and is not then governed by the Sports Promotion Act. So then, if it's not sport, what is it under Swiss law? One point interesting, we can talk about skill-based gambling. Seems a bit odd like that, but if we look at the Swiss Gambling Act, we're gonna have a lot of answers there. First, the consequence of not recognizing esports as the sports is that the exception that you have on Article 1 of the Swiss Gambling Act do not apply to esports. As you can see, this law does not apply to sports competition. So if you have a esports event, this law could apply to esports event. Then if you look further in this law, you have these two definitions. What is gambling and what is games of skill? Gambling, the law defines gambling as games which by means of a stake of money or the conclusion of a legal act give rise to the hope of a gain. You pay to enter into a tournament and you have the hope of winning something. Seems familiar, huh? Then games of skill, or skill-based game. They define it as gambling in which the winning depends totally or mainly on the player's skill. Also rings a bell. So for the Swiss Gambling Supervisory Authority, they consider skill-based gaming with the following characteristics. So it's games where more skilled players achieve higher winnings, there is a low probability of winning by chance, players can influence the game scores, and the game requires complex skills. Based on this, for me, it's an entire definition of what esports or a video game is. So the question is, should it be considered as, maybe not should, because this is not my opinion here, but is it considered as a skill-based gambling? If you look at the website of the Swiss Supervisory Gambling Authority, for them, yes. I called them and I asked several questions. Actually, they said that if an esports event involves monetary stakes with the hope of winning a prize, it's likely, underline likely, qualifies as skill-based gambling. What is likely? We all know that in law we hate definition with likely because we never know what to expect. The authority actually informally confirmed me that they will need actually to analyze each code source of each game to understand how much chance there is in this game and how much winning is based on skills. And of course, as you can imagine, I'm not sure Electronic Arts would be happy to hand over the code source of their FIFA game to a government authority. Huh? So this means that if we follow this definition, the consequences is that anyone operating a skill-based game competition or esports competition should have a license. If the event operates across canton, so intercantonal, or in the law it said across canton, online or through automated means. So technically some esports competition can, or some organizer of esports competition would need a license under the Swiss Gambling Act. However, there is a gray area actually here, and the authority confirmed me that technically they do not really apply this because they are not sure where to stand on this. So they say that most organizers will only need a license if there is a high entry fees and if there is a high winning price, and if it's operated online. The question is, what do we do with LAN parties or something in person? They told me that technically it could be considered as a skill-based gambling, but they won't do anything because they're not sure, but it you can ask them, apparently you can submit your file with all what you are organizing and asking them for an answer, and they will never answer you. Actually, they will say, we cannot guarantee that if someone denounces you to the authority or to the judge, some judge could say, oh, for me it's Swiss gambling. So sorry, I know that we all wanted an answer here, but actually we actually don't have a correct answer here. And the problem is that under this Swiss Gambling Act, there is severe penalties if you organize an event and you don't have a license. The highest sanction could be if I'm not mistaken, 500,000 Swiss francs. So it can probably discourage major esports event taking place in Switzerland, and that's probably why we don't have a lot of enormous esports events in Switzerland. So not a sport for the government, maybe skill-based gaming. Another interesting question is, what about an Olympic sport? Of course, the Swiss Olympic cannot discuss about the status of the sport, but can actually recognize the National Sports Federation. We talked before about the fact that in France, you don't have any federation. In Switzerland, actually, we have one, the Swiss eSports Federation. This federation was founded in 2008. They are also one of the founding members of the International Esports Federation. And their main goal is, of course, to gain institutional recognition. So can it be recognized as the National Sports Federation? If you look at the status of the Swiss Olympic, there is some requirements to be admitted as a National Olympic Federation. The federation has to be an association within the meaning of Article 60 of the Civil Code, which is the case. Good for that. It should be of national importance. What does it mean? If you go further in the statute, I will not show you the exact definition, but it means that you require members across at least 2 linguistic regions of Switzerland, at least 20 associations, or 1,000 individual members. Currently, the Swiss Esports Federation has around 46 ordinary members, which are usually associations, so it could be considered as of national importance. It was founded in 2008, so minimum existence of 5 years is also complied with. The last requirement is problematic here. To be recognized, you have to be either affiliated with an international federation recognized by the IOC, not the case here, or you have to promote a sport in the sense of an individual motor activity, management of a national competition system, and with respect to ethical values. Here, I'm not sure of what will the solution of Swiss Olympic be. Will it recognize as having a lot of motor activity? Ethical values? Same problem with what we talked about before with Counter-Strike and other games where you have to kill your opponents. To my knowledge, the Swiss Esports Federation did not apply for recognition, so we don't have a strict answer here. But they have apparently exchanged some letter of intents, but we can't say a lot about this. But it's also one of the founding members of the International Esports Federation. So what about the International Olympic Committee we have here in Switzerland? If we look at the Olympic Charter, we see that the IOC cannot also recognize a sport per se, but it can recognize a federation. Here, the article is a little bit broader than what we have in the Swiss Olympic Statute, so there is some room here. The International Esports Federation is not recognized yet by the IOC, I will directly tell you that, but there is some interesting initiative by the IOC in esports. And contrary to what we could think, IOC is very much involved in esports. For example, already in 2017 during the Olympic Summit, Thomas Bach made a speech, I think, where he recognized a potential sporting activity in esports. They say competitive esport could be considered as a sporting activity. Interesting to see that in 2019, the Swiss government said no. The IOC is already in 2017 asking this question and already saying that it might be considered as a sporting activity. They also recognize the fact that to be involved in esports, the athletes train a lot, which is comparable to athletes in traditional sports. So we have a lot of traditional sports element here as well. In 2019, after an analysis of 2 years, they adopted what they call a two-speed approach. They distanced themselves to all the game involving killing someone, etc., and they focused on sports simulation games. They said we should encourage collaboration and integration in sport with an emphasis on virtual and augmented reality, which, thanks to this, there is more and more physical involvement. They say that for all the other games involving killing, etc., we will just promote an ethical and healthy lifestyle at all levels, whatever that means. Then in 2020, they issued 10 collaborative guidelines for the practice of esports. I will not go through all of these guidelines, but they said that they should promote physical activity, always going through this question of physical activity, and they should assist international federation in forming partnership with game publishers. And it ended in some really interesting initiative. First, in 2021, I think they, during COVID, they saw an opportunity to do something, and they created the Olympic Virtual Series, which was a competition in which athletes were able to compete in titles all related or with a focus on sports. So you had a game like Swift, which is a cycling game where you actually cycle on a bicycle through augmented reality. Then you have virtual regatta or Gran Turismo for car racing. Then in 2023, pretty recent, they created the Olympic Esports Week, which is interesting, is that everyone could enter into this competition. You had online qualifiers, and then the finals were in person in Singapore. Then we can ask them ourselves, what for the future? And actually, already in, I think, October last year, during the IOC session, Thomas Bach expressly announced that they created a commission, an official esports commission, and this commission is charged with exploring plans to create an official Olympic esports games. This raised many questions, of course. Will it move the government or some government to recognize esports as a sport? And also on another note, there is not only the international esports. I know we are going out of Switzerland now, but an interesting initiative related to the Olympics is that the Olympic Council of Asia in 2022 already took a step further. They had the Asian Games in September 2023 because it was postponed because of the COVID. And they included esports in the Asian Games. They also included that athletes competing in esports could win Olympic medals. And it's also interesting to note that instead of focusing on the sports simulation game as the International Olympic Committee did, they actually took a lot of these more major titles you have in usual esports. You didn't have Counter-Strike, unfortunately, nor Rocket League, but they already included Dota 2, Street Fighter, League of Legends, all games where technically the goal is killing your opponents. So you already see some people involved in the Olympic going out of this question of ethical value, you could not kill someone, etc., etc., and already involving games in the Olympic Games, here only Asia, but Asian Olympic Game. Will the IOC follow these footsteps? It's another question, and I'm not sure about this. All of this also involves many questions of dispute resolution. I will not go into it right now because I understand some other people will talk about it later on. But if you involve esports in the Asian Games or in the Olympic Games, We already have some dispute resolution mechanism for disputes in the Olympics, which is the CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sports, which I know well. What do you do if there is an issue? And actually, there was an issue. I will not go further into this because I think time is running out for me, I'm sorry. But someone will probably talk about it. There was an issue during one of the semifinals, if I'm correct, of the Asian Games. An esports related issue, not a disciplinary one. There was really a problem with one of the computer or one of the, I don't remember if it was a computer or something else. Anyway, they filed an appeal before the CAS. And the question is, what will the CAS do? Because in the CAS code, you have a provision saying that CAS is only competent to deal with disputes related with sports-related matters. Is it sport for the CAS? I tried to ask the question informally to some people working at CAS, and no one told me anything. They all said, oh, I don't remember, this case is somewhere, it's open, I know, but I don't know. So we will see what the CAS do. Will CAS take this opportunity to recognize esports as a sport? CAS being in Switzerland, this could move what we talked about before. Will the government change its view on what is esports? And this involves a lot of issues. I will not go through everything because I understand I'm talking a bit too much. But what we can retain here is that there is no specific legal framework in Switzerland, and esports is not currently considered as the sport under the Sport Promotion Act, and thus esports events are likely to qualify as skill-based gambling. Is there a need for a legislative change? I'm not so sure because I don't like the idea of France of creating laws for everything. It's a view. Switzerland is more liberal, you know that, but probably just creating an exception to be sure to go out of the Swiss Gambling Act will be good. Then would we need esports to be recognized as a sport by the government is another question we can talk about later on. But in my opinion, the government's role should be limited just as it was always limited in traditional sports. In traditional sports, you always had a private entity who led the way, who created their own rules, and I think it's exactly what's going to happen here, and that's why we have a lot of private entity, a lot of private stakeholders trying to lead the way in creating some solution, and that's what we're going to talk about today, the solutions to all the disputes or the problem we have in esports. So thank you very much. I'm open to questions if we have some questions.
I have a question. I have lots of questions about how this qualifies as sports and sport because there are exceptions. There are sports that qualify as violent, like fencing, for example. But I don't want to go that route. We will discuss that later because we don't have much time. But I do have a question regarding, so we are in Switzerland, and it's not a coincidence that this first conference happens here. Mm-hmm. This is the place of the world where like sports are governed. So we have the Olympic Committee in Lausanne, and we have a FIFA in Zurich. And this is a hard question. I mean, how the people who created those organizations in early 20th century were those who defined what sports were and defined where they were going. How do you imagine the structure of this esports governance evolving in the future? So we have the esports federation already. Is this going to be like the Olympic Committee for all of the esports, or each esports will have its own organization like FIFA? Mm-hmm. How do you imagine this association landscape evolving?
What I would say is, as we said before, the biggest problem is that esports is not free. The video games are not free. Someone owns the game. Not like in sports, no one's owned the sport. So some organization can be created by some people, and then this sports organization is able to govern this sport. The problem here is game publishers. They have the final say on everything. They have the final say on whether they create the competition, on the final say on whether these athletes can go into this competition. They have the final say on which team, and they also have the final say of changing the rules, and they can even imagine they can issue an update during the night, changing everything in the game, so they have the final say on everything. Currently, I don't feel that they are likely to give away their power, let's say. So if there is an organization at some point, I don't see it being created without the support, or at least the support of every game publisher, or at least one or two. It suffices to have one or two game publishers that are in the idea of creating something. The others will have to follow, because if there is 2 or 3 games that are well known and well competed by everyone, the others will have to go. So I think we will need the support of game publishers. Without the support of game publishers, it's going to be very difficult.
Cool. Well, Florence, we have time for questions from the audience.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Anyone has questions? There's one question there. There's Mike.
So I'm Noordwand, Sports Law. Thank you for your remarks. Would a solution be if, like, already existing sports federations or committees, like, for example, the IOC, would create their own video games, and then they would have the say on the game per se? So if the federations themselves, for example, FIFA, if they would create their own eSports league, then they would also have the licenses and the rules and the updates that would all be centralized under the hand of FIFA, like all the other rules of the games of football per se. Would that be a solution, or could that be a way that maybe would be, for the future?
It's already the case in some competition. If we look at what was done for the Olympic week, the International Federation collaborated with the publisher. We had, for example, the FIA collaborated with the Sony, if I'm not mistaken, for Gran Turismo. The question will be now if the International Federation could create its own game and then own all the rights, then they can do whatever they want. The problem is then an association, will an association be able to create a game good enough for people to play? I don't know.
We have examples of open source software like Linux, which is excellent software. Why couldn't we think that some community would develop a game that is good enough and with more credibility to be a game that people will adopt? We don't have the answer, of course, to that, but I don't know.
We need a community to organize the sport competition. With Linux, I think it's easier to have a community. But in video games, if you want to organize a video game competition, the video game needs to be such hard. You need some practice to become a video game competition. The worst case, or a video game is there's a video game, there's a new version next, and the next version is better than the first, and competitors are not pleased with this. I think there's. Yes, I think it will be difficult for an association to create a video game which can be played as in sport.
And you always have also a commercial. You should take a commercial way in the way you're publishing your game, in a way that people would be interested first to play the game, to watch the game, and so then you can create some competition. An association, I don't think that today federation have a lot on their plate, so not sure they can create a game. But if at some point they can have either an agreement with someone or a publisher for a game, or create their own game, probably they can create their own tournament then in the end and dictate their own rule. Currently, as we saw, the major titles that are played professionally in esports are all first, not sports simulation, except maybe for FIFA or EAFC, but a game in which you kill someone, etc., games which federation are not interested in yet.
No more questions?
So, I think there is no more question online, but maybe I can ask one. So this is for Patrick Pithon. So thank you very much for your intervention. I was wondering, you advocated for a free from state approach, a kind of bottom-up approach when the private organization try to do something and later they try to find out the good legal tools to solve the problems. And you were criticizing the French approach, which is very normative and actually, yes, tend to define and create rules, control, and put the nose of the administration everywhere, basically. That's right. But what if the current, and I don't know the answer, what if the current state of the legislation, which will be the status of gambling, will be too normative and would prevent this let it be approach to be realistic? I mean, maybe the current framework is too restrictive and the state intervention could create room, freedom, liberty for the private organization to develop their own esports events. Thank you.
For me, it's not that the state is not too strict. They just didn't think about it. When I was talking about this to the gambling authority, they told me, yes, the law came into force in 2019, and they just didn't think about the effect that it will have on esports events. They thought about sports competition. That's why there is this exception in the act currently. But they didn't think about putting an exception for esports competition. I don't think they created the law thinking about how we should consider esports event as skill-based gambling. It's just an effect. So I don't see the necessity of the state to be normative on the question. Maybe just put an exception on esports event, competitive video gaming, or however they want to call it. And then, as in traditional sports, just have private entity doing what they should do. The question is also, should we need a government to help on the power that game publishers have on esports? That maybe here we would need help, but I don't know the answer as well. So.
I mean, I was thinking about this idea of skill-based gambling. I mean, apparently there is like some kind of, like a line where you have games more on the side of you can win by luck, and others where it's impossible to win by luck. And this also is true in sports. One time I had a very long conversation and discussion about comparison of football and rugby, and the argument was that so in football you can sometimes win a game like by luck quite often compared to rugby, where it's almost impossible that the rugby team that is with lower skill than the opponent wins. It's almost, that's why we never beat the All Blacks in Argentina, we know rugby. But I'm thinking, maybe it could happen that some games, some esports, are considered more on the side of like a gambling and others not. To me, some of them are almost impossible to win by luck. I mean, for example, I play Age of Empires. You never win that by luck, So
definitely in Age of Empires, you will never win by luck. In Overwatch 2, I don't think you will be able to win by luck. I participated at the tournament at Polylan. We were last with our team. We tried, but
that's bad luck.
Bad luck, no luck, because luck is useless. No, and the thing about luck is that there is some people, for example, saying that in the FIFA game, if you do this and that, you have more chances of scoring another goal, or you have more chances that your goalkeeper will do a mistake, etc. Things we don't know because we don't have access to the source code of the game. That's why the gambling authority was like, we don't know. We don't know how much chance are involved in some of the game, and we don't know how much skill are involved in some of the game. But still, in sports competition, as you said, you need sometimes a bit of luck to win. So that's why maybe they just like put an exception, saying sports competition out of the question of gambling. Esports should be also out, I think.
In France, we had a question about gambling just for one game. It was Hearthstone, the card video game, because you have a card and you don't choose this card. And some people say that it cannot be played as a video game, as a competitive video game, because it's the luck, or bad luck, which give the good, the bad card. I remember it was the only game for which there was this question.
The only game I can think of you could win by luck are those related like card games. Because all of the others, I mean, all of those I can think of. Anyone can think of some game where you could win by luck, a game in gaming?
I
mean,
think
the defense
you can
rest,
win
you
by
know.
luck in FIFA as well. A bit.
Yeah.
You weaker skills, but you can win by luck in FIFA as well.
FIFA, okay,
Can have
maybe
a bit
FIFA.
of luck as well. I think luck is concerns every game a bit, but yeah.
And
More or
FIFA
less,
definitely.
that's a question of more or less.
FIFA definitely. That's why when we lose, we also always say that there is problem with the bad luck or whatever. But definitely card games, because you don't know what you are going to draw. So there is some luck involved.
No, I come from the blockchain world, where open source is a norm, and when you do open source, in the case of Kleros, for example, you want to see that the randomness that is implied in the selection of jurors is actually verifiable. So you want to be sure that people who are picked at random to make a decision were actually picked at random, which you don't have in the closed source gaming, environment, which is maybe an argument by which there is a regulatory, pressure for games to become open source. I don't know if that's going to happen, but people thought we would never have open source operating systems. I don't know.
Or just verified by whatever authority who has access to the code, but not everyone, so you still protect the code of the game. Maybe could be a solution as well.
Well, many thanks to all three of you. Federico.
One last question, can we
yes,
have?
there is one,
There is one
last
last question.
Okay, so this is the last one, yeah?
Just another thought, like if there is open source, my concern would be that there's not enough funds to offer these really high prize monies that are on the table, as Patrick said. And would that maybe then lead to what we see, for example, in boxing, that there's like a professional league that is like the real boxing with millions of prize money, and then we have got the amateur league, which is currently not even recognized anymore by the IOC.
I mean, I think that there is, football is open source, and there is a lot of money in football. So, if there's interest of people to watch it, I think that the business model is going to be, I guess there, right? It's going to be different for the publishers, but I don't know. I don't have an answer for this,
Okay, so thank you very much, Federico, Geoffray, and Patrick, for this very interesting conversation and presentations on the legal framework of eSports. So now we are ready to try to find solutions for litigation, because we know what we are talking about. I suggest we take advantage of the coffee break. Already it's a coffee break to continue the discussion. Please be back at 2:50, so in 20 minutes, something like that, so that we can have the next panel, which will explore the existing dispute resolution mechanisms in eSports. We have coffee and other beverage which are served in the lobby. So thank you very much. Thank you.